Okay, this week is Parsha Shmini. What does Shmini mean? Eight. Okay, and this is the 8th day. Last week's Parsha, we were talking about the inauguration of the Mishkan. So there were 7 days where they were preparing for the Mishkan to be inaugurated. And they were taking it, dismantling it, putting back together, back and forth. Welcome.
Right.
And finally, on the 8th day, Moshe said, okay, now we're not going to anymore take and dismantle. This is when God's presence will come down. So what happened with the sacrifices, we spoke last week about how you had to make a constant fire, and that resembles the fire that we're supposed to constantly work on within ourselves. There was always a constant fire, and the wood was gathered by the priests, by the Kohanim, and it was always constantly made. But after you lit the fire, God actually created a fire from above. So you do your work, and then God creates the fire. God makes the fire descend from above, and that shows that the karbanos, the sacrifices, were accepted. So on the 8th day is when this all started. Up until now, it's all the preparation. We're preparing for the Mishkan. We're doing kind of it's almost like, when you have a play, so you do all the practice, and now's the real thing, right? Now's the real stuff. So we were practicing for those 7 days, and finally on the 8th day is when God actually, the fire appeared from God to us, and to consume the sacrifices. And this showed that the sacrifices were actually accepted, and this was the end of the inauguration of the Mishkan. Why was it that it happened on the 8th day? What is number 7 and what is number 8? We prepared for 7 days. What's 7? What do you think of when you hear 7? 7 days of the week. Nature. Nature is 7. When we talk about nature, there's the 7 days of the week. We also have the Shemitah cycle, which is the 7th sabbatical year. We also have the Yovel, which is after the 7 times 7 cycles. So 7 resembles nature, the natural order. 8 resembles what comes above the natural order, the miraculous order, the thing that is beyond nature. There's nature that everything seems natural, and then there's number 8, which is the miraculous. It goes beyond nature. And that's exactly what's happening here. 7 days we prepared. We did our stuff. We erected, we dismantled, we put it together, we took it apart, we did our part. But finally on the 8th day is when we get the gift from God, when God actually gives us the gift of the fire descending from God. And that was when we see that, okay, now's where it's at. And this really resembles our own work as well. Oh, let's talk about number 8. What do we see then with number 8? When you think of number 8, what is number 8?
8 days of Hanukkah.
8 days of Hanukkah, the miracle of Hanukkah. That's again the miracle. It's going out of the bounds of nature. Can you think of anything else that happens on 8? Bris Milah, which also shows how the child is now getting supernatural strength. He's connecting to his soul in a way that he can now fight off all natural desires and natural instincts through that power that he's been given of his soul. So that's another thing of 8. We also have Shmini Atzeres, which is the 8th day of Sukkot. So after the 7 days of Sukkot, finally on the 8th day is when God says to the Jewish people, I am one with you. I'm giving you this extra connection, this extra spiritual gift of how you're connected with me and the strength to be who you are, to shine your light on all the nations. So that's 7 verses 8. But number 8 comes after number 7, meaning it comes connected to 7. So we need to do our work of the 7. The 7 is the work that we put in, the natural work that we put in. We put in the work. They were working for 7 days trying to do this inauguration of the Mishkan. And then day number 8 comes and God says, okay, now's my gift to you. You've worked on the natural. You've tried to use the natural for godly reasons. Now comes number 8, my gift to you, where I'm giving you that power of even transcending nature and even getting to a miraculous state. And this is really the work that we have in Galut, in exile, that we work and we work and we work, And then finally comes the era where it's beyond nature. It's no longer nature. Nature is going to be, we work through nature, and we do all our work through nature, but finally comes this era of Mashiach, which is actually a miraculous time period. Now, how do we get to this miraculous time period? The whole second part of this week's Torah portion is all about foods that we're allowed to eat and foods that we cannot eat. Tameh and tahar, things that are not kosher and kosher, things that are pure and things that are impure. And that is really how we get to the stage of the eighth, that day number 8, which is the time period of Mashiach, which is the time when we're working so hard to get to, is by knowing the difference between pure and impure and refraining from the impure and focusing on the pure. And that's why we have all the ideas of the animals that we can eat, cannot eat, and the whole ideas of what is kosher and what is not kosher in this week's Torah portion. So let's talk about the kosher and not kosher that is in what's permitted and what's forbidden. So, nowadays we understand a little bit of the idea of you are what you eat, and we have like organic foods that we look exactly the same, just cost twice as much, right? And we know, okay, there's something to this organic food, even though it costs twice as much, but it's been, the way it's been harvested, the way it's been taken care of, the pesticides are not there. There's things that we do not see when we look at it, but it has certain abilities, certain powers. We know grain-fed pasture versus regular pasture. You can't see it on the food that you eat, on the chicken that you're consuming, but we understand that there's something there of how it was done and how it was treated that causes us to want to be healthier or less healthy. And in the same way, we have animals on a spiritual level that are spiritually impure and spiritually pure. Animals that are mutar, which means permitted for us, and animals that are asur, that are forbidden. When we look at the word mutar, permitted, and asur, the word asur actually means bound. It's bound, it's held down. And when we talk about things that are tameh, things that are impure, we're saying they're bound. We cannot elevate them. The whole point of eating food is that we elevate the energy in the food. It becomes assimilated within us, and we're elevating it to a higher plane by using it for positive things. So if I eat that delicious banana cake that's on the table, and I use the energy from it, I have now elevated the bananas that are in there, the eggs that are in there, the flour that's in there. I'm elevating that all because I'm using those things for a godly purpose. I'm using those things to now have the energy to give charity, to do good deeds, to do Torah study, to pray, all the things that I can do with them. And all the more so we see with the animals as well. The animals that we consume is the plane of animals. It's the animalistic, and we're trying to elevate that animal energy to now use it for something holy and something positive. So mutar means that we can elevate it. It's free to be elevated. Asur means it's still bound. It's bound still by negativity, by a certain energy field that we can't access. And so how do we access it? How do we elevate that? By keeping away from it. So there are certain things that when we stop from doing, and these are all the mitzvot in the Torah which are not permitted, the asur, the lotase, when we do not do those things, when we refrain from that whole field of reality, that is how we elevate it and make it pure, by not using it, by refraining from using it. So when we look at the traits of the animals that are impure, and when we look at the traits of the animals that are pure, I want to look deeper into what are the traits of the impure animals and what are the traits of the pure animals, and how does that affect us? How can that, on a very subtle spiritual level, actually affect us? I'll tell you a short story that happened with my father. My sister was teaching in a school. Her son was actually learning in a school. He was learning, and he was very advanced in his learning, but the class was kind of pulling him back. And so she wanted him to go to this special, she wanted the teacher to go faster. And he said, I can't, your son is very good at this, but I have to worry about the rest of the class. So she says, okay, so I'll come in and teach the class. That's the kind of sister I have. And the topic that she was teaching was Talmud. So she wasn't fazed. This was 6th grade Talmud in Los Angeles. So she decided, okay, she's going to teach the rest of the class. A few kids went out, her son and some other kids, and the rest of the class, which was 19 kids, was what she was teaching. So she prepared, and my father gave her material of what to use in order to prepare. And it helped that she also brought chocolate chip cookies for rewards and all kinds of other things. And she made all these charts and all these things that she was teaching them. And the kids were listening and they were engaged. But she kept finding that they didn't retain the information. She would come back the next day and they just weren't really retaining it to the level. They were very engaged, and yet they weren't keeping the information. She didn't understand why was it not clicking. So she mentioned this to my father. And he said to her, I wonder if the boys are washing Negelwasser. Now, Negelwasser is what we wash first thing in the morning. After we wake up, we wash our hands. We ritually wash our hands. Just like we wash before bread, we take a cup and we wash 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times to ritually keep out the impurity at nighttime. When we go to sleep, it's like we're 1/60th dead. To sleep is like 1/60th of death. And one of the ritual impurities that we're going to see in this week's Torah portion is death. This is the hardest ritual impurity, because when something is dead, it no longer has the ability of being kadosh, being holy. And that's why in Judaism we love living. The more a person is alive, the more holy he can be, and the more he can be connected to God. But once something is dead, there's no longer that ability of the body being elevated to a higher level. And that's why the harshest form of tumah, of impurity, is actually a dead body. If you touch a dead body, you become impure. If you touch a dead carcass of an animal, you become impure as well. So death is something that causes this. And again, when we talk about impurity, we're not talking about dirtiness or anything like that. That's why when we talk about when a woman is impure, when she is a nida, when she's menstruating, it's not that she's dirty or in any way, but what we're talking about, she has touched a certain subtle aspect of death. She had the ability of giving life. The egg was there, and she had the ability of creating a life, and that was released. So she almost touched this subtle level of death. And that's why she also goes to the mikveh, which is what purifies us and what invigorates us with more life. So back to the story, right, which we're in the middle of.
She's teaching 19 kids. Go ahead.
She's teaching 19 kids, 6th graders,
Boys.
and boys. And my father says, maybe they didn't wash Negelwasser. And she says, Daddy, you're talking about from school, a religious school, a cheder. Next year, the boys are going to be bar mitzvah. Like, it's impossible. But the next day, as she went into the class, she said very nonchalantly, show me, by raising your hand, show me who has not yet washed Negelwasser this morning. And about 75% of the boys raised their hand.
Oh my.
So she just had them, without any kind of judgment or anything, she had them just walk to the sink. Okay, we're all going to wash Negelwasser this morning. And she continued doing it until she made sure that the parents were also more careful to make sure that the children washed Negelwasser. But I guess the boys were in such a rush in the morning, you know how it is, that they neglected to do this. So she then said to my father, how did you know? How'd you know that? And he says, it's pretty obvious when you're telling me, you're describing me all the things that you're doing and how you're making it so engaging and how the kids are just, there's some kind of disconnect. And it's that disconnect is called this subtle aspect of tumma, this subtle aspect of impurity. It's like when you, when you're charging your phone and it's plugged in, but the charger's not working or the plug is not working because it's just not working. It's dead, right? The light, when the chandelier could be beautiful and the bulbs could all be in there, but if the light switch isn't on, the electrical current is not going to get to it. And in the same way, there's a certain dullness, a spiritual dullness, when a person doesn't wash Negelwasser in the morning, which is this ritual washing that we do. So the way that we do it is when you wake up in the morning, after going to the bathroom, after you actually, before you say any prayer. Some people wash as soon as right by their bed, but you make sure that you wash even afterwards. At least you wash before you actually eat something or before we say any prayers. Any of our prayers, we wash our hands, except for the Moda'ani prayer. That's the only prayer that we say first upon waking up in the morning. The first thing that we say is Moda'ani. But after that, we try to ritually wash our hands. And we wash 6 times and we say, Al the bracha, al netilas yadayim. This is what we do. And in that way, we are then, it's not a matter of cleanliness, but it's a matter of opening ourselves up to be receptive to holiness. That dullness, that tumma, that impurity, that kind of residue of dullness, of impurity is no longer on us. We've cleansed ourselves of that. A similar idea, even deeper, is the mikveh that a woman goes through after touching, so to speak, death or the lack of life. She immerses in the mikveh and she emerges completely reinvigorated and rejuvenated. And on a subtle level as well, I mention this story because we can see that there are aspects of tumma, of this impurity, that can really affect us on a very subtle spiritual level, where it clogs our pores, it clogs us up for being receptive to a greater holiness. And that's similar to the animals that we are talking about in this week's Torah portion, which we're told some are kosher and some are not kosher. So let's talk about these animals and how we see from these animals, the traits of these animals, different subtle traits of what we don't want and what we do want. So the first thing that we see is the animals that we may eat from have to have what? What are the signs of kosher animals? Split hooves and shoes that cut. Those are the animals, the animals that we can eat from. So when we talk about split hoofs, the hoof is that part of the foot that actually touches the ground. It's interesting. You were just talking before about putting something on your foot, right? To get rid of impurities at night, right? So that's the part of the foot. The foot is the part of the person or the animal that touches the ground that we walk on. On a metaphorical level, this refers to when we touch the ground, this means that we're involved with physical reality. We're touching physical reality. We're involved in physical reality. So the fact that an animal has split hoofs is teaching us a lesson of how we need to be when we're involved with touching the ground, with touching physical mundane reality in our lives. How should we be involved with it? On a split level. We need to be split, meaning we need to bring down to the mundane the godliness. We need to take that mundane and use it for a godly purpose. So the animal with the split hoof is teaching us that how should we relate to physical reality? How should we relate to everything around us? We should relate to it by making sure that there's this connection with the spiritual. that we're connecting spirituality to the physical reality. So when we do eat something, we try to say a blessing on it. We try to use the energy from it for good things. When we have or deal with anything physical, we try to bring in the spiritual. When we wear clothes, we make sure that the clothes are not shotness. They don't have wool and linen together, because those are energies that don't combine together. We bring into the mundane reality spirituality in all aspects of our lives. When we are bringing into time, we bring into time prayers, or we use our time for prayers. We use our time for Torah study. We are bringing into all aspects of the physical reality the spiritual reality. And that's what the split resembles. Split is also between right and left. And that reminds us to distinguish between right and left, between good and bad. We constantly need to think about what is good, what is bad. What can I integrate into my life? What should I be allowing into my life when I touch physical reality, when I am dealing with the way of the world, when I'm dealing with all the matters of the world, when I'm dealing with all the dilemmas that come up in our reality? What is right and what is wrong? Do I have that clear? When I'm dealing with a situation, am I clear on what's right and wrong? It also teaches us, how sometimes we need to use very different emotions. There are times when we're dealing with people that we need to use chesed, we need to use kindness. There are times when we're dealing with people and we need to use gevura, which is strength and severity. Meaning there are times when you're dealing with a situation and you need kindness. You need to be a kind person to them. There are times when you have to say, hold on, my boundaries are being completely obliterated here, and this is not good. I need to hold true to who I am. And if I cannot hold true to who I am, this relationship is not sustainable. So there's that distinguishing between good and bad, between what is positive, what is negative, between choosing how I'm going to relate to others and to the world around me. Split also means, when a person is split, it means that you're open. So we need to be open to other ideas, to growth, to hearing from others, to feedback. I'm open to understanding things. I'm open to growing. Sometimes we get so stuck in who we are and what we are and the little boxes that we create for ourselves that we don't open ourselves up to growth. We're so stuck with our routine, and I do this and I do that and then I do this, that we don't want to change. Well, maybe you can improve your routine, maybe you can add something to your schedule that will give you meaning, but we get so closed in our perspective, in our day-to-day routine, in our day-to-day order, that we're not open. We're not open to trying out new things, to hearing about new things, to exploring ways of growth. And that's what the split hooves teach us. Then we have the chewing the cud. What does it mean when you chew your cud?
Things over again and
You
again.
think things over and over. You regurgitate. You think things over and over again. I was just reading this. This woman was asking on an advice column, what should she do? She always finds herself saying things and then she regrets it. She's saying things, she blurts it out. Yeah. And she says things to her husband, and all of a sudden she's like, he says, I was just so hurt by what you said. And she's like, I didn't mean to say anything hurtful. But she realizes why it was hurtful. And the column person who was some people who were answering her, I think it was on, I don't even remember where I read it, were saying, well, why don't you try to put yourself in a perspective where before you say anything, you try to think about it. Take a moment, take a pause before you say something, to actually, 5-second pause. And in that 5 seconds, maybe you won't blurt out things that you don't mean. Sometimes when we're really angry, same thing. You're so angry, you just want to give it to that person because they just got you so angry. And we'll say, count to 10, count to 5, whatever it is.
You always.
You always, exactly. So the idea is digest. digest. Think about the words that you're saying. Think about what you are going to say or act, and think about it before you actually do it. And sometimes you do something. It's important to, again, think about what you did and the consequences of what you did. Digest it. Is this something that I want to do in the future? The only way that we can grow as people and as human beings is if we digest, if we think about what we've done and we decide that this path is good and this path is not, this methodology is good, this methodology is not. We need to think about, regurgitate your actions, think about what you've done, think about your methodology, think about what mode of operation you want to take, and if you need to change. And that's the idea of the chewing of the cuds. So that's the animals in the animal kingdom. Next we have the fish. Fish. So what are the signs of the fish?
Scales and fins.
Scales and fins. Okay, so kosher fish has to have scales and fins. And it's interesting, it says all fish that have scales also have fins.
Really?
Yes. But fish that have fins don't necessarily have scales. And yet the Torah still gives us both signs. So there's something to learn from both the fins and the scales. And what are we learning from the fins and the scales? So the scales are there to actually protect the fish. Scales protect it. The fins are what propel it forward. It uses its fins to swim forward and swim faster. But the scales are there to protect the fish. And the scales and the fins, when we talk about characteristics that we're trying to get from the kosher animals, from the kosher fish, is the scales represent integrity, being true to who you are, that protection, protecting your value system, protecting your integrity, protecting your understanding of what's right and wrong, protecting you from the outside world, protecting you from values that might be on the outside, not values that you want to integrate into your life. The fins are what propel us forward, and they are what we would consider ambition, or using your talents, using your capabilities for a positive end, using your talents to advance further, to do what you're supposed to be doing, finding your calling in life, your unique calling, what you specifically as an individual need to do. Use your fins. Use your fins, because only you have the fins that you have to do what you need to do. And yet, all fish that have scales also have fins. What does that mean? That's teaching us that even though it's important to have ambition, even though it's important to find your calling and to find your unique calling, your unique voice, the first thing that you need to focus on is that integrity, that values of who you are, to know who you are. When you're educating a child, there's different things that you can be focusing on. Our school system, and there's always this debate. What should we be doing? Should we be teaching children skills, or should we be teaching children morality? And the idea is the first thing that has to be is morality. The fins will then come. The skills will then follow. But the first thing that you need to teach a person is being true to themselves. You can have ambition, but if you don't have that integrity of who you are, you can be trying to get ahead by stepping on people, and you could be trying to get your voice heard by doing all kinds of wrong things. And that's not really letting your voice shine. That's not really being who you want to be. But if you first focus on your integrity, your values, your value system, being true to a moral code of being, then you can always focus as much as you want on actually finding that unique part of yourself and trying to voice that part of yourself. So that's the fish. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, next we have the fowl, right? What's the signs of fowl? Chicken or birds?
With the feet.
Huh?
Something with the legs, the fingers.
No, it's actually,
Not birds of prey.
the ones that are mentioned are not birds of prey, but it's actually specifically mentioned in the Torah which are allowed and which are not allowed. And only those that it says are allowed. And this teaches us, there's no actual signs. It tells us like exactly which ones. And this teaches us the importance of tradition, the importance of asking people, the importance of having mentors in our life, the importance of having people who we ask are not giving a sign. There's not always signs in life. You know, there's not always like a rule book of do this and don't do that, and then you'll be good. You'll succeed. You'll be a fine person. Like we wish sometimes that we could just open a book and say, okay, what do we do now, right? Whether it's in parenting, okay, what do I do now? She's throwing a tantrum like in my 3-year-old. What do I do now? You know, there isn't always a book that you can open. It depends so much on the personal situation and that particular situation. And the idea is we should all have mentors, people who we can turn to, people who we can ask, people who we can get the advice from, who actually teach us what is tradition, what is, because the birds that are mentioned in the Torah, we have to know exactly which birds do they apply to, which ones, what does it mean? The words are there in written in Lashon HaKodesh in Hebrew. How does that apply to us today? And that's based on tradition. It's based on what we have passed on from all the generations. This is allowed, this is not allowed. And that teaches us the ability, the power of having a mentor, the power of tradition, the power of generation to generation teaching us and explaining to us what should be. And that's why it does say that every person, aseh lecha rav, make for yourself a teacher, make for yourself a mentor. And the Rebbe was very into people having a mashpia, someone who you can go to, who can advise you, who can, when you have a situation or a dilemma or a problem in life, have a person who you look up to, who you can ask, what should I be doing now? Have a rav, a rabbi who you go to, a mashpia, a mentor who you go to, somebody who you can say, this is my situation, this is my personal thing that I'm stuck in right now. How do I get out of being stuck? How do I get out of what is happening to me right now? How do I move forward? What would be the right way of moving forward? It was interesting at the Shiva for my father, a woman told me, you know, your father always knew how to answer not the question but the person, and that's what's so important of why having a rav or a mashpia is so important. And one lady said to me, you know, I called him one year and I said, am I allowed to use whatever it was? And he said, yeah. She says, and I called him the next year and I said, can I still use, you know, can I use it? Maybe it was for Pesach, I'm not sure for what it was. And he said, no. And she says, what do you mean? Last year you told me it was okay. Why can't I use it this year? And he says, because last year you were on a certain level, but now you're on an even higher level. So for last year it was okay, for that it was okay, but we're always growing. Judaism is all about growing. And this year, you've grown so much by leaps and bounds, so this year, that's not good for you anymore. And that's really the power of what we learned from the fowl, from the tradition, that we have a tradition of which chickens, which fowl, which birds we're allowed to have. It happens to be a lot of them are not birds of prey, you know, none of them are birds of prey, but we have the tradition of which we can and which we can't. We need to be able to have mentors and people who we can go to and ask for our particular situation. Okay, now I want to mention, we spoke about the animals that are not kosher, but there's one animal who has, we said they have split hooves and they chew their cud. So there's one animal, and one animal alone, who has split hooves, but does not chew its cud. Which is that? The pig. The pig. And it says that the pig, in the time of Mashiach, it's called, what's a pig in Hebrew? The word for pig in Hebrew is chazer. Chazer. So the word chazir is lachzor b'tshuva, to return. It says the pig will actually return. In the time of Mashiach, the natural order is going to be changing somewhat so that the pig will then start chewing its cud. It will then have the symbols of the kosher animal, and it will actually be kosher. So if anyone's looking forward for the time of Mashiach so you can have your bacon, I don't think we're looking forward to that, but we'll actually be able to have the pig in the time of Mashiach. And again, we learn something from this, like we learn from every aspect of Torah. Torah is so beautiful that every single thing we learn a message, and there's a lesson for each and every one of us. So when it talks about the split hooves, and it has split hooves, but it doesn't chew its cud. And really the pig is like the epitome of not kosher animals. If you tell any person, even a person who's not very religious, you know, I don't keep kosher, but the pig I won't eat, you know, because the pig resembles the unkosherest animal. And why does it resemble the unkosherest animal? Because it's like it has split hooves on the outside, but it doesn't chew its cud. It's like it's saying, look, I'm kosher, because chewing your cud you don't recognize unless you're seeing how the animal's actually digesting. But it's saying, look, I'm kosher. I have split hooves. You see it right away. Look at my feet. You see right away that I have split hooves. I'm kosher. But you're not. So it's the epitome of a hypocrite. The person who says, I'm kosher on the outside, but when it comes to their inside, they're not kosher at all. And that's why it's something that's so, we stay so far away from it. We have such distaste for the pig because we have such distaste for hypocrisy. And yet, this is the one animal that when Mashiach comes, we say it's going to change. It's actually going to be kosher. And this teaches us a lesson that although hypocrisy is not good, ever, but what we do say is sometimes it's okay to act on the outside in a certain way, because eventually you might bring yourself to feel that way on the inside. So the pig has the kosher feet, but it doesn't have the chewing the cud. It doesn't internalize the kosher. And we say start with that. Start sometimes on the outside, not in the sense of being a hypocrite, but start with the external. Start with the outside, and eventually it will come to the internal. So, for example, you might see somebody and you're really not interested in being kind to them. In fact, you don't like them at all, right? You'd rather just ignore them and be rude or be unkind to them. And we say, it's okay, act like a pig. Sometimes it's kosher to act like a pig. Act on the outside like, again, you don't have to be a hypocrite and be overly, but act civilly on the outside, because that might come to the inside. That will come to the inside. Or you're ready to get angry at your child or whoever it is that is misbehaving, or your husband who's doing something that you're so angry. Act on the outside like you're not ready to burst. And it will affect you on the inside as well. So on the outside, you might be ready to feel like I'm enraged. Act like a hypocrite. It's okay to be a pig in that instance. It's okay to act like the pig, because it will eventually cause you on the inside as well to be that way. So that is the message of the pig, that sometimes it's okay to act a certain way, because eventually it comes to us. Act on the outside a certain way, it will eventually, you'll internalize those actions. And the last point that I just want to mention is at the end of this parsha, it talks about the snake, it talks about a lot of the creepy crawly things on the ground, and one of the things that it mentions about the creepy crawly things is the snake. And it says the snake is bent over. It's bent over, and the Zohar says that the snake is the evil inclination, and it's bent over means like it walks with its lowered head, like walks lower with the head kind of lowered, and then it crawls on the ground. So it starts first with the head lower, and then it crawls on the ground. And we learn from this that what does the snake do? The snake the evil inclination tries to tell us to bend our heads, to feel a little lower, to feel lower about ourselves, to feel like we're not so great. That's how the evil inclination starts. The evil inclination doesn't tell you, do something terrible. It tells you, who do you think you are? You're not so great. You think you're such a tzaddik? You think you're such a righteous person? You know, it's okay if you don't pray. What are you? So today you miss, no big deal. You're not so righteous. It's okay not to be so great, because who are you anyways? And through that, the evil inclination eventually convinces us to actually crawl on the ground, to get lower and lower. So we start off by bending our head. We start off by thinking, who am I? Who am I really? And that we should know is a tactic of the evil inclination, because we really should feel with our head held high that we are a piece of God, that we are a piece of divinity. And when we know and we feel so strongly that we are a piece of God, that God is really inside of us, that our neshama is so holy and so pure, then we will act that way. So feeling lowly, feeling, who am I? I'm a piece of garbage. I'm not worthy, actually makes us act not worthy. Whereas feeling, I am holy, I am a piece of God himself, he is inside of me, that too makes us act like we are holy. And these are the lessons from the Torah portion of the week, from the animals that we learn about, of what we may eat and what we may not eat, what is mutter, what is usher, what is bound, and what is free for us to use and assimilate into our lives and bring to a higher level of godliness and elevation.
Okay.